what we have today is a panel on design experience. I think one of the most talked about topic if you're in the technology industry, if you touch upon digital transformation as an area into your day-to-day work on what you do as for your companies or for your startups and so on and so forth. And we thought it will be opportune for us under the theme of the conference, which is about change and the net new and the future, to talk a little bit about what's happening in this part of the world around design thinking, right? And before we have an eminent panel, we'll get to know about their experiences, we'll talk to them, we'll learn from them. But before we do that, what I wanted to do was to learn from you. You've been in the industry for a long period of time, you've seen the ups and downs of the industries, you've seen many transformations in different forms and shapes. What's your sense of what is design thinking, right? We keep hearing about it. As a consulting company, we love talking a lot of jargons around design thinking. But I want to know, what do you think of design thinking? Maybe we'll start from there, and then we'll pick some ideas, we'll pick some themes, and we'll learn from our panelists here in terms of what they have seen and what their experiences are. But I need some volunteers. Otherwise, I'll have to just point some names and I have to point some fingers and make you stand up and talk. So volunteers, anyone? I know you're here for a reason. I would like to believe that you're here for a reason, and I would like to get started by knowing what you know and what you think, and then we go from there. So volunteers on what really is design thinking? Yeah, good. We have one. Can we give a mic, please?
So my exposure of design thinking is basically a TED talk that I went through.
Right.
It was about how I think the medical equipment designed previously, and how shocking it was for children to when they are going actually for that, and how difficult it was them to go through that experience. And I think the presenter talked about how it changed it, how he changed the appearance of, so that it is more like a the interiors were all changed, so it was more like either you are going to a fun shop or just some cartoon characters. So it's about empathizing with your consumers.
Okay.
Right. The experience, not just about the solutions that you're offering to get things done, but also empathizing with the experience that they go through and trying to make it more, much better.
That's a good point. So empathy, experience that a customer wants is something that aligns with design thinking. Anyone else? Anyone else has a unique point of view? You can feel free to say that design thinking is boring and bullshit. There's nothing new about it. We'll let the panel defend that or support you. We don't care. We've got these guys to help us understand. So feel free. I'd love to have some contrarian thoughts.
Okay, I hope I'm audible. So probably, say suppose we have an issue, and we come up with a solution or a design, and then we implement it, and then we think that maybe this is not the right solution, or maybe we could have optimized it a little bit more. So I think design thinking is,
But isn't that something that SAP and Oracle always did? And they kept doing, they still do it.
No, that's.
And they still have the blues and grays.
The point is, so you think while you're designing, rather than, thinking after you give out the solution. I think that is design thinking.
Okay. One last comment from this side. I think this side is dominated, so we need someone. So we have a hand at the back.
Hey, this is Dheeraj from Wells Fargo. One of the simple aspects about design thinking is you don't do too much of, in fact, you spend a lot of time before you design something with people who are actually facing the issue, and come up with a kind of a tentative solution. So it's a reverse approach. Right now, I'm thinking out loud in a way that nowadays what the technology is doing right now is they are moving into that direction. Earlier, 10 years back, the approach was always we have a problem, we fix it, we design it, we code it, we give out a solution. Right now, you think the reverse direction, the way Uber, the way Ola, and all these guys have thought about. So for me, design is a reverse approach. Start with the customer, give them a prototype, let them play with it, and then improvise on that. So that's my thought.
Okay, I need one last comment from any good design thinking examples, any good experiences you had which tells you that this is a unique design and Apple is not an option. So Apple is not an option. Any other example that comes to your mind? Yeah. Shout out.
So one of the designs I really admire is like the HP keychain opportunity where they completely rethought the printer.
Are you from HP?
No.
Okay.
But the fact that they rethought the printer, put all of the low reliability components in the cartridge, and really, they changed the landscape. And that was a really considered design.
Okay. Any other examples? Okay, good. So that brings me to all of you gentlemen. I think it'll be good as you start responding to give a little bit of an overview of what your experience has been, what's your background and all of that. And then one of the questions that I want to get started with, and which is what I asked the audience as well. There's buzz about design thinking. If you talk to any company, be a bank or a retailer or an enterprise software product company or an engineering service provider or a telecom provider, in some form or shape, everyone's talking about design thinking. But to be honest, we don't know what really that is. We saw varied kinds of answers coming in. So there's no unique definition of, oh, this is a phenomena, or this is a paradigm, or this is a theory, and this is what it is demystified. So we'd like to know from you, to get things started, right? What really is design thinking, right? What is your sense of design thinking? And maybe start from Amazon, and Dale, your side of the business, and then we go across.
All right. Thanks, Praveen. So hi, my name is Dale. I lead engineering for Amazon. I've been with Amazon for the last 9 years, and in my current role, I lead engineering for the Amazon India product. So the Amazon India website, the mobile app, as well as all the experiences that consumers have on the product, both online as well as in some of our vertical tools like Jungly.com, Amazon Now, and other projects we're working on. Before joining Amazon, I was in a more traditional IT startup company where we were focusing on the retail industry. And so I've seen the progression, if you may, from how people have thought about design as an element that came later in the stage of projects, where you thought of it really at the end of the project, just before launch, and how it's come all the way now, where really design is something that is the first thing we do. And here in Amazon, we don't call it design-centric. It's a nice, catchy phrase, but we call it something as simple as customer backward thinking. It's a key approach to how we think about problems. We start with understanding who is the customer, who is the end user, and it could be a consumer, it could be a supplier, it could be a vendor, it could even be some of our internal associates, like the delivery associate who shows up at your home. And we work backwards from what is that experience that person, that individual wants. And then we figure out how do we build that experience into the product. So for me, design-centric thinking has really been more around thinking backwards and applying a human element to technology. It's something that some of you have already referenced. It's definitely empathy. It's definitely thinking about what will that user do with the product and how will we make sure that they have a great experience, and then applying that kind of construct all the way back into the way you go about solving a problem. There's a lot more to that, but I'll stop here and I'll pass it over to the rest.
Thank you, Dale. Hi, this is Boomi from Door Corporation. I'm leading the software and digital organization. Before Dover, I was with GE for 11 years, and I've spent my career in building SCADA systems. How do you build?
It could be a little louder, I think.
How do you build industrial systems? And my encounter with design thinking has been that how can industrial systems could be seen as a consumer-centric system, right? And that's a very different kind of a mindset. A lot of IoT analytic stuff, visualization, and how it can make meaning to what decision making is all about. In my current role, I'm building a competency in India, including design thinking. We fundamentally believe that design thinking, in my opinion, in my experience, has been that, I think one gentleman pointed that out in the audience, it's not just about solution, it's creating that experience. You can explain it in 1,000 ways, but you have to leave the customer for you to appreciate the design thinking. There are many definitions, but if we can empathize as a customer, and in the process, it could be a field engineer on the ground, or it could be that service engineers standing in a harsh industrial environment, trying to analyze the data and take a decision that may have a huge impact to your plant. If you can do that, and that's design thinking.
Okay.
So that's my.
So before you start responding, right? I want to play this up a little bit, right? So both of them kind of alluded to design thinking being centered around how customers think about a certain scenario, what do they want, customer backward, and so on and so forth. If you look at Ford as a company, and I think this is a famous quote everyone would have heard, Ford's CEO once said that if I really went to customers and asked them what they want, they probably would have asked me to get a horse which turns faster, right? They would have never got to a stage of saying, I need a vehicle with this and that inside the vehicle, and so on and so forth. You deal with startups, and please go ahead and introduce yourself as well. You deal with startups. How much of what the customer backward or customer centric thinking, is that relevant in the new paradigm, and which is where Apple and all the other companies have operated, where I don't know how they've innovated, but clearly they've not innovated because the customers asked for it, but they innovated because of something else, right? So what's your sense of design thinking in that context?
Sure. So
I think it's on mute.
my name is Jay. Jay Dutta, JD usually shortened to that. I'm a designer. I've been a designer for many, many years. I've run my own companies. I've done my own startups, mostly in the UK and Europe. Last few years, I've been in India. Developed the Adobe UX team from scratch. Then at Flipkart, which is again one very crazy ship, had a huge team of 100 plus people. I left that to pursue my own startup. In the process, got acquired by a VC, just me. So I'm a designer, traditional, typical right-brain thinker in a very left-brain world of VCs and numbers and all of that. So what am I doing there? I'm trying to understand, and just to sort of recap, I've also worked in accelerators in the UK, helping a lot of UK startups kind of start up. At that time, it was not called startups. They were probably SME businesses were what they were called then. Startup is a more trendy word, just like design thinking is trendy as well. Design thinking is something that it fascinates me because that was the way we thought. I mean, it was nothing, I don't quite understand the craziness about it, but that's the usual one. When we were right in the first few months of our design school, one of the first exercises is that I would be paired with another friend of mine. He would be the deaf and dumb guy, I would be the blind person. We had to go to a certain place and do a certain task. We had to take a public transport, we had to pay people. It was the most difficult time of my life. And that teaches you empathy like nothing else. All the first few years of design school were pretty much geared towards understanding how do you look at the world from a point of view of a 4-year-old. How do you argue with your teachers? Because you should not take things just for granted. And I think this is our typical traditional education. Design thinking for me, for all of us with so much experience, is a lot of unlearning. Unlearning what we have learned and going back to what we always knew, that these are my friends, this is what we do, this is how they are. I think it's humanizing as opposed to machinizing, if that's a word like that. So that's probably where it is. Coming back to the question which Praveen asked me, startups, I think, highly relevant. One of the biggest areas I advise startups, I advise startups which are part of our portfolio. So we have a fairly wide portfolio, advise them on a bunch of things, including how can they become better at the product market fit. That is very, very important, because you think this is the problem that we are trying to solve. Actually, it might be something else. People pivot, people understand, people sharpen their focus. Similarly, I meet with a bunch of startups who are not our portfolio, and this is probably my advice to them as well. How do you do that? And in some cases, like one very interesting instance recently, working with a B2B auto company, so they're into automotive parts and they do a whole lot of SaaS software, where I essentially asked the CEO to come along with me and meet the guys on the road, kind of guys on the street who actually will be using the product. He was more than happy to. We all went, 5, 6 of us, and we've been doing this on and off. I think part of it is not just to see what they say, part of it is to see their environment, how do they operate, how hot or cold, or what are the sort of constraints that they live with. And I think this is again going back to it. Not thinking of a solution, but understanding the problem better and better so that we can solve it even better.
Okay, perfect.
Praveen, just one small clarification on the human element of design thinking. I think it's not necessarily developing or designing what user asks for. I think empathy is really about, like I mentioned, living the user. I intentionally say living the user because user will not be able to articulate.
Right.
You have to live the user to come up with the design, and at that point in time, you are applying design thinking. I just want to make sure that
Sure.
we get it right. Yeah.
Perfect. So now that we've understood that there are different dimensions of how design thinking is evolving, and we've seen some examples in the past, and these examples are becoming a lot many, in the time that has gone by in the last 12 months, and probably even more examples will come out. What are the trends which are reshaping the design thinking approach? At the end of the day, keeping customer at the heart of it is something that's been practiced even when Wright brothers created an aeroplane, right? Or they invented, or they did their magic around it, right? Why will the paradigm of design thinking continue to evolve going forward? And what are the elements that you think as a company and as an individual are going to reshape or reimagine the way design thinking is thought today or being done today, if at all it's being done today?
So that's a great question. I think one of the things that we've seen with the industry is that as technology becomes a more integral part of people's lives, the lines between technology and people start to blur, right? It starts to become all one part of the person. Like right now, many people in the room are probably married to their phones more than to their couples, because you want to depend upon a device. You actually are at a place where your phone has all the information about you. It has all the apps that help you become more productive, more successful. Also has the tools that help you execute your daily life, like catching a cab or figuring out the plane schedules and so on. And as we look forward, I think that difference between technology and humans will get even more blurry. When you think of an emerging trend like wearables, where you have people now wearing watches and devices that are basically integral tied into the body parts, right? So you can track your blood pressure, you can track the movement you've made, you can also be able to track your body information and relay that back to an app that then can relay that back into maybe a hospital or keep you informed. When you think about smart homes, where you go into Internet of Things, where you drive up in your car and your home recognizes that you have reached your garage, and it automatically switches on your lights and turns on your favorite music channel. So there are a lot of these inventions happening, where even across Amazon we see a lot of these trends where the way in which people interact with technology, which used to be pretty much a distinct operation, where people would go to work on a desktop and then come back home and read a newspaper, that's kind of blurring away. It's really becoming a part of our daily lives. And as we see that, I think there will be more and more different trends where people will experience technology in ways in which they don't even realize they're actually interacting with the device. It'll become so natural, so internal to the process that people may not realize. But the design of the device may make it so seamless for people that they will be able to execute their work without having to feel that they're actually interacting with technology. So I think Internet of Things and wearables is one space where I see a lot of future movement in this direction.
Got it. So one of the other things, Boomi and Jay, we keep hearing is about artificial intelligence, and in a minute we'll also talk about virtual reality, and I know everyone has heard about Pokemon Go and things like those. Here's the problem, right? I mean, all of these things are good, all of these things are evolving, and yes, obviously technology is becoming a lot more ubiquitous. People can do a lot more with their devices today, with apps, economy shaping up and all of that. But there's a parallel theory emerging that with the pace of innovation that's catching up, the use of applications or use of apps on your phone may not be relevant going forward, because artificial intelligence will come in and your voice-based intelligence searches will diminish the purpose of having an app on a phone, right? I don't need to have an Uber app or an Ola app or a Taxi for Sure app to book a cab, because I can just ask my Siri or Cortana to do that job from wherever they can do the job, right? So while the world is gravitating towards, we've got to design for mobile phones, we've got to design for the millennial experiences, the pace at which these experiences are transforming is crazy. So as a design thinker, as an organization who's been wanting to catch up, How do you cope up with these trends? How do you, because execution on some of this is really difficult, right? Talent is obviously a problem. Convergence of technology is a problem. Sometimes cost is prohibitive. You hire a design thinking firm, you have to pay an exorbitant amount of money, for creativity and things around it. How do you cope up with the pace of innovation? Because it's really crazy, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will give you a real example. See, the design thinking, first of all, to your question, in my opinion, because of technology change or the medium changing in the future, the fundamental philosophy of design thinking will not change. And in Dover, the kind of practical experiences, for example, we are building connected trucks. These are heavy industrial trucks. When a driver is, just for example, when the trucks meets with an accident, the loss is huge, and we are working on how do you actually avoid the driver before an incident occurs. What kind of and you can't put a panel in the driver when he is driving at that speed at such a heavy machine. What kind of experience that you can create without overwhelming with information, but at the same time you want to alert the driver, for example, his fatigue levels, or whether you want to use a wearable or whether you want to use a voice recognition. These are all technology selections, but fundamentally, how can you solve this problem of a driver not making a mistake, driver behavior? That's how I see it, right? I mean, there's no
That's a good one, but the relevance of drivers is being questioned at this point in time, right? So fast forward 5 years, you may not need a traffic police guy, you would never get a ticket, you would not even need a driver. So you may design for efficiencies around driver behavior, but what's the point if that person's not going to be right?
If I may take that, I think for what I've seen, and I think once you move to the next level of technical sophistication, I think the types of design challenges you're solving will be very different. For example, I was talking to the guy who runs the product management for Alexa. Mm-hmm. Alexa is Amazon's voice recognition software, the engine which powers Echo and other devices, right? It's the Cortana equivalent, or Siri equivalent, if you may. And one of the design considerations they had, and if you think about Alexa is basically, to a point, automating a lot of the functions that we thought were important. So with an Alexa, for example, in the US right now, you don't need a shopping app. You can talk to Alexa on your phone and say, order this item for me.
Absolutely.
And without even having to interact with an app, it will place the order for you and the item shows up. So to your point, it does take away the traditional design challenges of how do you build an app that is customer backwards and so on. But even with that, the next level of challenges that come up are interesting, because this person was saying that within Alexa team, they spent a lot of time figuring out what should be the tone that Alexa uses when it talks to the individual. Right? What is the personality of Alexa when people think of Alexa as an element? Because you don't want it to be a robot. You want it to be a natural conversational tone that people have. And just like people think of Siri, and people probably think of Siri as being sassy because Siri can reply back to you and kind of even make fun of you if you ask Siri a wrong question. They had spent a lot of time trying to figure out the design of the tone and the nature of personality of something like a technology like Alexa. So I think the challenges that emerge are going to be different, but there will still be that focus on what is that design-centric or user-centric behavior we need to think of, even when we think of this advanced technologies like voice and virtual reality and so on.
Got it. So Jay, a question to you, a follow-on to that one, right? Yes, the world is moving towards digital transformation. Every aspect of our life is getting disrupted. But if you take examples like e-commerce, and you kind of have a background, both of you in fact have a background in e-commerce. While if you look at India's story, while e-commerce is growing really fast, but if you look at the offline retail model, that still gives about 90% of the retail revenue, and that 90% will definitely become 9% in some years from now, but it's not today, right? Today it contributes 90% of the retail revenue, and that's a fact, right? So purely from a practical aspect of it, and which is where I think you might have experiences talking to startups, are people solving for the future which is really far off, maybe 5-10 years? Or are people solving, when they think of design thinking, is it more relevant for them to think of problems today but which are large and which will continue to exist in some form or shape, at least in the foreseeable future? How do people, because a lot of these people sitting here are coming from from backgrounds and companies which are getting disrupted, and there's obviously a net new thinking, but not maybe there's a possibility that a lot of that disruption is not today, right? 90% of the revenue that these companies derive will continue to come from the legacy models, which is where there's also a need of design thinking and newer experience and all of that. Walmart is a good example, right, where they continue to sustain their offline retail model. They've been very creative about it and things like that. They obviously have gone down the path of being an online retailer too, but their offline retail presence continues to be a strong one. So in your experience, and if some of us, after we go back from the panel, were to start thinking about it more from a practical standpoint, where should they place their bets on?
So, okay, I think it was a fairly long question, so I'm trying to sort of get that.
Sorry, yeah.
So, okay, I'll kind of try to answer some aspects or some slices of that. Broadly, if you look at innovation, and I'm sure most people here are from very large companies, is that right? Pretty much 90%, 95%. And I've been part of large companies, 10,000, 20,000 workforce typically kind of thing. What I've always seen and heard and read about is the fact there are two kinds of innovation. One is the sustaining kind, which essentially you need to innovate, otherwise you'll be out of business. So you need to do version 2, need better than version 1, and version 3 should be better than version 2, so on and so forth. And the other one is a disruptive innovation. And disruptive innovation is what we would love to sort of work on, but I think we don't work on, or we can't work on. There are a lot of constraints one way or the other. I think design thinking is useful for both kinds. It's useful for, let's say, Photoshop 10 goes to Photoshop 11. Great. I think that kind of thinking is needed, and there are a bunch of designers and product guys who are thinking about that. Then there is, of course, like, if you think about, I'll take Adobe as an example. Adobe decided to sort of rethink their business as a subscription model. First, we went for a boxed software to being a suite of products, then eventually a subscription. Each of them was in some ways a smaller but an equally disruptive thinking in their business model. It had a lot of implications. Things may not have gone as well, but things did go well kind of eventually. There is an element of risk. So this is not thinking in the era or in the area of the product itself, but in the product delivery, kind of how do you sort of take a product. And a lot of it was not taken very nicely by the users. So here's the way I see it. Sustained or sustainable innovations are the ones where you answer to the behavior of the customer. The customer's behavior is so and so. I'll make sure he or she gets that plus 10% or plus 10x or 5x or 2x. The big bang innovation is where you change the customer's behavior. And you change it without the customer really resisting it at all. They actually feel that's actually pretty nice. So here I am going down the street catching Pokemons, and actually don't mind it. I'm actually traveling more, walking more, doing more things. And no one really bothered to ask that, hey, this is not a behavior that's typical of me. I don't go around catching Pokemons for myself or my kids or so on and so forth. But that is a new behavior. We invented it for them. The problem that I see, there are two parts of it. One is design thinking is not an end in itself. I mean, design doing is probably the end in itself kind of thing. That is where I think another example I was giving just before this was Microsoft, Nokia. Nokia had a tremendously good facility for user research, one of the best in the world. Between that research, between that insight gathering, between what users really want, what they get, Nokia lost it somewhere. They couldn't predict it. Things just went haywire. So necessarily good thinking is not good enough. I think you connect the dots. You make the thinking into doing into something out there which eventually changes behavior. That's when kind of the real magic happens. Otherwise, I think design is essentially a combination of logic and magic. That's what probably the whole thing is. And that's what you got to sort of do. There is some logic, but some of it is magic. Some of it people are not ready yet. I think Pokemon Go, just again mentioning, is like a 25-year in waiting for that overnight success. So I think that 25 years, first mover is not an advantage. Some of these guys will fail at a whole bunch of things, and people will learn, and someone will come and innovate and out-innovate you kind of. That's where design comes handy. Also because designers can have a fairly powerful sense of imagination and the ability to visualize things. That's where we can almost visualize an alternative future from what it is today. That may not be the one which can be coded or made up and so on, but it's a human sort of visualization. Almost like if you guys have seen that movie Her you've seen, where this guy falls in love with his operating system. I think it's a bit like that kind of. So there will be futures like that, and in some way, film artists, designers are kind of doing that. They are kind of helping you see alternate realities, kind of.
If I may jump in there, though, I think, and this is the pure techie in the room speaking, right? Because I don't have a formal training in design, but what I also want to pass along is that it's not necessarily, well, I agree that a lot of the design comes from people who are creative and people who are, in some sense, even trained to be design thinkers, like professional designers and visual designers. But I also think that design-centric thinking is not necessarily relegated to only people who are in that sphere. Anyone in the room here who has a role to play in the development of their organization or product or technology can show design-centric thinking. As an example, in Amazon, we've built the mechanisms in place by which we can very quickly experiment with different user treatments and protect the business at the same time, giving people the ability to be creative and apply design-centric thinking. And one example is, back when I was in Seattle, the search experience, if you've searched on Amazon, you've seen the results that we show. An engineer thought about it, saying that, hey, what if we told the customer that the item they're looking for in search has only less than 5 items in stock? So what if we put a message every time the item quantity, inventory in our warehouse fell below 5? That message will be good for the user because they will know that this item is probably going to run out of stock. So they don't really buy fast. They may not have the item tomorrow because we'll probably sell it off in the next in the day or even in a few hours. So that was an idea that came purely from an engineer. We actually made the change. We put that into the production, and we launched it on the website. And we saw that customers really loved it. And we measured it using our mechanisms, and we found that there was an increase in the number of customers who bought products because when they saw that message, they really liked the fact that they were being informed about a possible out of stock, so that they were incentivized to purchase. So it's both a win for the business, but it's also a win for the customer. So I was bringing that example as an example of where it doesn't have to be that design-centric approach comes from a certain set of select few. It can come from anybody. It's really about thinking backwards from the customer. And to your early point, not necessarily trying to ask the customer for answers, but thinking about what would customers like better in this scenario that I have. And anyone potentially in this room could be applying design-centric thinking to their work.
Got it.
Just on the future, you spoke about the future. I think we all spoke about empathizing with the user. I think in the future it's also going to be about empathizing with the machine, because we are already talking about a machine telling a field engineer that, hey, I need your attention. Before it goes into an outage, the field engineer should know, and he should know intuitively that, okay, I need to go and attend now. There is 90% chance that this machine may go into an outage in the next 5 hours. So it is not just about the human, but we may be designing systems for the future for the machines.
And that's a very, very valid point. I think MIT is already talking about design as participation, and participation which is about machines, users, people on the field, actual users or consumers, friends of consumers, a whole bunch of people. And I think when you look at the system, designing for the system, essentially we are nudging systems to uncertain outcome. And I think that's a very humbling task, actually, when you look back at it. And I think as just to add to what Dale was saying, and what I had mentioned earlier, I think design thinking is a lot about unlearning things that you learned. I think you are all good at drawing at some point, all good at doing some creative stuff, good at writing stories maybe even. I think it is to understand and tap your basic human instinct, which is to solve problems. We would not have come here in so many years without being tool makers, problem solvers, and all of that. So I think this is just tapping back, unlearning, and learning something new.
So before we open it up for audience for more questions, one of the things that, because it's sitting in the Indian ecosystem, they all of these 900 companies have been there doing product engineering, innovation, have achieved a certain success in whatever form and shape you may want to attribute it to. But clearly, design thinking is an area which is new even to this ecosystem, right? And a few companies have been progressive, but few others are trying to catch up. in your opinion, what are the top 2 or 3 roadblockers for having this logic and magic happen in India, right? In Silicon Valley, it's happening. In New York, it's happening. It's interesting, I was asking someone about the talent hotspots for design, and the answer to me, and I necessarily may or may not agree to this, the answer was designers have a lifestyle, and they will be in Silicon Valley and in New York and maybe in Bombay and Bangalore and so on and so forth, right? So with sort of, coming back to the question I wanted to ask, what are the top 2 or 3 challenges that this ecosystem is going to face as they think of design and as they think of future and as they think of helping their global organization succeed in the innovation paradigm going forward? Bhoomi, if you want to start, and then.
First of all, this is just a spontaneous thinking, right? It's a learning for myself that who said design thinking is only for computer science,
right,
or engineering, right? And design thinking could be for any field. I know there has been research that says that this talent can come from only metros, but I think fundamentally this is a skill that one is it could be a passion, but it also could be learned. I believe that who taught design thinking to the guys who built such a marvelous temples in India, right? The monuments,
right,
standing like 5,000, 10,000 years old. To your question, I think one is about there is a new learning. How do we justify investing on a team or talent which is only doing design? Are they developing something? It's really that we need to start with training the senior leadership to understand that okay, this is a paradigm shift, and for you to disrupt, design is a key.
Is it a trainable skill? Quick comment, and then we open it up to people.
Yes, so I think just to also add on, I think the key thing, by the way, my opinion is that people are innovating and are design-centric in a big way in India. In fact, some of the ways, especially for a company like Amazon, because we're a global company coming into India, we've also seen that how people in India have innovated on the experience based on the customers in India and based on the real situations in India. So there's a lot of learning that even from India we're taking back to the global use case. That said, I think it is important that people realize that the design thinking is directly related to business impact. We have seen by data in Amazon, we've measured impact to see that every time we've done improvements to our experience and every time we've improved even minor things on the site or in our apps, we have seen a direct correlation to the increase in revenue and increase in customers placing orders. So as soon as companies start realizing that design-centric thinking is not just a catchword, it's actually going to impact their bottom line, I think that will be the first step in creating the investments and the culture required to further design-centric thinking.
So Jay, your quick thoughts on challenges?
Quick challenges, or quick thought on challenges is really 2 things. One is finding good talent. Talent which can actually help you and is as invested as you are into embedding it. The second thing, probably especially with multinational corporations, is a feeling that of not made in here, as in mostly in the geographic sense, not in the organization sense, which is that, hey, maybe there are better designers out there in the Bay Area versus X versus Y. I think that's when you look at the resourcefulness, which Dale was mentioning and all of that, I think the resourcefulness is all over. It's just a matter of taking some of that. That, and the third thing, of course, is the mindset. I think senior management, mid, junior, everyone has to change the way we think. I think it's a lot of sensitization around alternate ways of thinking and doing things, or trying out things, experimenting, failing, having a slightly higher appetite for failure, possibly, within a controlled situation. That would help.
Wonderful. So I think we have time for just 2 very quick questions.
Praveen, I think so. We can take only one question.
Yeah, okay. We'll take one question.
This is Nagesh. I agree with you. The design thinking is not just confined to the software engineering or a product development. I don't know, I'm not opening another debate for sure. The social enterprise is another area where people actually take the empathy as the problem and then really go and start thinking about it, solving a bigger problem in this society. But the question that I have for you is why is it so relevant now? Why is it being talked so much now than in the past?
Why now?
I think what's happened is a proliferation of far too many things. There are too many similar services, projects, products, everything vying for your attention. And in the survival of fittest game, I think one is that you need to stand out. That's one part of it. The other part of the story is that you are also afraid that someone may come and out-innovate you, maybe pull the rug right under your feet. So you can't really be certain of that. At least you can be certain of trying to stand out in the middle of your known competitors. There is an unknown competitor lurking somewhere out there. And maybe you're getting too old-fashioned the way you do things. That's probably the other one.
Wonderful. So thank you so much. I think it's been an interesting panel. I hope the audience has some takeaways, incrementally or even in a more defined way. I think this concept is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. The world is going through a fundamental shift and transformation. Survival of the fittest is, again, one more time is becoming more relevant than ever. So Darwin should be happy about it. So we'll reconvene maybe, as we work along, as we work together, as we see you next year, in similar capacity. I think there'll be a lot more traction, a lot more focus, but we'll keep chatting up with you. We'll keep learning from experts like them, and hopefully things will move in the right direction that we need them to move. Thank you so much. We have a little bit of a small token of appreciation. So.